an increase in turnover. We've also had a massive increase in volumes as well. We've got a lot of earnings that are filtering through, and overall a very positive performance, which means that the NSE is starting to breach interesting technical levels. Do you think that this kind of move to the upside is sustainable?
Yeah, I think so, certainly. If you look at from a macro perspective, I mean, the government is now borrowing $600 million foreign. So it means on the interest rate side, we're probably going to start to see domestic rates starting to come off significantly. And from the oversubscriptions we've seen over on the longer term dated papers, it suggests really interest rates are coming off. Which means this money will have to find their way back into equities. And if you look at the performance of companies, they've been surprisingly good. Even for the large caps, you've mentioned there, British American Tobacco, and the earnings are coming in quite well. And even for the companies which are disappointing, we're still seeing very strong revenue growth. So our only concern is mainly on the cost side, but revenue still appears quite healthy.
Yeah. Let's just touch on the overall NSE 20 because it's up around 1.4% year to date. Are you foreseeing a much better equity environment? And again, I mentioned 2 points that are very important, or 3 points essentially, is the political environment. We've got a higher inflation scenario that is playing out, which is resulting in a very high interest rate environment as well. Do you think that this is going to be a dampener? We know banks are going to get affected. Are the overall equity market going to get affected as well?
I mean, inflation is coming off, and already we started seeing those indications in the first one month of the year and towards the close of last year. The political scenario, it remains a bit of a concern, but nothing significant, nothing that we're probably not expecting. The implementation of the new constitution is still ongoing, on track, a few delays here and there, but more or less on track. And with the companies performing a lot better despite the challenging environment towards the end of 2011, it suggests with improvements in 2012 that this momentum is going to be sustained.
Eric, you mentioned British American Tobacco, so let's just delve into some of those numbers. Recording a 75.3% year-on-year increase in net earnings. We know that they are planning to expand further into various African regions as well, but Kenya operations are relatively key for this company. Would you say that it is a buy, even though we are going to see significant capex spend going forward?
Yeah, I mean, for BAT, we've looked at the numbers and they look really solid. I mean, if you look at the capex spend that you've just indicated, it's not significant in the context of their overall profits. So they're still going to maintain their 100% dividend payout despite the additional capex. So the capex is still within the depreciation level. So, and then if you look at the earnings, there was a cataract business which came through to Egypt last year on a full year basis. So that really helped the earnings growth. But going forward, we still see the momentum being maintained. You mentioned there the export markets remaining quite strong. Yeah. And the domestic market as well. They've gained market share and domestic pricing has remained quite healthy.
Let's also touch on Bamburi, and this is of course a company that has been doing quite well, but from a net earnings perspective, we only saw around 11% increase year on year. And then also when you look at what has actually been happening on the revenue front, that is up quite strongly, but has warned that this year could be slightly tougher.
Yeah, we were a bit disappointed with the performance of Bamburi. In fact, we were actually surprised that the price has been ticking up slightly. We thought the high revenues, the strong increase would actually translate into higher profitability. But what happened is that cost appeared to have ticked up a lot faster than we expected. And that's why that bottom line sort of came in challenged. We still expect revenue to remain healthy for 2012. But obviously, we need to find a bit more details with regards to the cost and see how that trend moves with regards to 2012. But obviously, it was a bit disappointing.
That's interesting, though, Eric, because it seems Bamburi has breached the 12-week resistance level of around 139. It's trading at 140. Would you say that we could actually see a bit of weakness going forward? And as you mentioned, it is interesting that it is ticking up quite extensively, despite the fact that some investors are disappointed with the numbers that came through.
Yeah, we think it could come off. I mean, the increase in price was on relatively thin volumes, so we've not really seen lots of volumes moving through at that price. So, once we start seeing more volumes coming through at that price, that's when we'll really say that, that's sort of an established level.
Let's also touch on Kenya Power, 11% increase that came through on the profit front. Costs are also falling within the space. Can these numbers be sustained? We know that on Friday it gained on the back of the news on the earnings front, and then yesterday stalling somewhat.
Yeah, actually, I think they did announce at the close of trading on Friday. So the numbers hadn't really hit the market during the trading session. So yesterday was the first time, and as you mentioned there, it actually declined. EPS actually declined. They had a rights issue last year. So overall, the revenue side came in well, but obviously there was a lot of pressure on the consumer because a lot of pass-through cost with regards to fuel costs. So a bit of disappointment there as well, but given unit sales were up, they did not disclose that, but we have an indication that went up, so that's generally positive.
Let's also touch on some of the most heavily traded stocks, and it seems that banks are dominating the highest volume and the highest traded stocks. And then, of course, Safaricom needs to be thrown into that as well. And looking at what happened yesterday, Safaricom, one of the top traded stocks, Cooperative Bank, Equity Bank, and Kenya Commercial Bank. Are you expecting these stocks to dominate the top traders?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the banking sector in particular, just from the overall perspective of the market, they account for close to 70% of overall sort of large caps. So investors really focus at them. And KCB, Equity Bank, you've mentioned those. Those are really some of the key ones that investors are looking at, especially ahead of results. So we've been seeing a lot of speculative trading on those. Safaricom, a traditional large cap as well with lots of volumes. We've been seeing foreign investors dominating that a lot of late. I mean, typically we've seen mainly foreign investors being on the buy side, but now we've seen, participation actually balanced quite well between the buy and sell side and quite heavily tilted to foreign investors.